Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Mitch. Good Friday morning to you all. I hope you guys are doing awesome out there this morning and having a wonderful start to your day. And I hope everyone has had a great week out there so far as we head off into our new weekend. We got some things to talk about in this morning's video, and we're going to pretty much go over the same information we've been going over the last, I would say, week since this past weekend. Of course, we had the crazy storm last week, and really since then, we've been just trying to figure out what's next. Last day of January, I believe it's today. Yeah, so we get into February, tomorrow. So what is the month going to bring? We're still trying to figure that one out. So we're going to go over all the model guidance that we got from overnight into this morning, even from yesterday, and just try to figure out if we're leaning one way or the other. So we'll speak on what we know. We'll get very detailed with it. I'll provide my thoughts on some things, and then we'll talk about today's weather. Appreciate all the prayers for my little girl that was sick yesterday. She's still a little sick today, but she's definitely feeling much better. So hopefully we can get rid of all this sickness here in the West family that we've been dealing with for about almost 2 weeks now. So we've been lucky, though. We've been blessed. Haven't really been dealing with any kind of sickness for several months now, and it's just kind of hit us like a freight train over the last week and a half, 2 weeks. So with that being said, if you guys have not subscribed, certainly consider doing that. Like the video if you like it. If anybody has anything that I can pray about or pray over, as always, please put it in the comments below. So we'll start this off by doing what we've been doing, which is the Climate Prediction Center update. This is the latest outlook from yesterday afternoon. Not a whole lot's changed between, pretty much the first 10 days of February, the 5th through the 9th, especially like the first 7 days of February, I would say. There could be some changes once we get a full week kind of deep into February, but this is between the 5th and the 9th. This is the temperature outlook. Just to pretty much sum this up, if you live in these warmer colors, kind of even the dark reds, that bright red, that burgundy right there, and the orange. This is where the National Weather Service is leaning towards above average temperatures in this 4-day time frame, day 6 through 10. Now, confidence is a little bit lower once you get closer to the blue. That's normally how it works. And then when you introduce that gray, this is kind of that battleground of temperatures where you could just be maybe slightly above, slightly below, or around average as far as temperatures. Then you get into this blue. This is where they're having higher confidence for below average temperatures. In some cases, well below average temperatures. You get up here to the Pacific Northwest, they're going with like Seattle, they're going with a 90% chance of temperatures being below normal in this time frame. So definitely cold across the northern terrain of the country, especially kind of the western portion of the northern section of the country. And the western U.S. and the general theme is a ridge across the southern tier, the southeast, and the eastern U.S. Warmer air, I think, will even take over areas of the northeast. Now, I will show you, well, let's just continue to move forward to the 8 to 14 day outlook. And this is going to take us from the 7th through the 13th. So, this outlook almost takes us clear through the middle portion of the month. Still hanging on to above average temperatures. They're leaning towards above average temperatures based off the Climate Prediction Center. But you can tell this blue begins to dive deeper to the south and the east and takes over more of the country. So, the western U.S., the northern plains, hasn't had much of a winter as far as really cold air and a lot of winter storms. Definitely nothing really for the lower elevations, those valley areas, the higher populated regions. But even the higher elevations have not seen much in the way of significant winter storms. I do think this pattern will support that. In fact, you got one coming in that's going to last the entire weekend right at this moment, last all the way through Sunday. Heck, there'll be another one next week, and we'll speak on that in today's forecast. But leaning towards above average temperatures in the southeast once again. So I think we could get some changes to this. We were going one way for about 24 hours, and last night models kind of backed off. So we'll speak on all that. We don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. We will have a new 3 to 4 week outlook that gets introduced today. So it'll be interesting to see what their take is through the later portion of the month. I'm very excited to see their thoughts on it. What we can tell you is it's definitely going to be an active pattern. Precipitation is going to be around normal to above normal for a good chunk of the country. The only areas I could see where it remains kind of dry is like Florida, the Southwest. Florida normally is dry in February. It's not unusual at all. But certainly leaning towards above average precipitation. Even in a shorter look at this is the 6 to 10 day outlook. Same thing. Higher chance of below average. Don't want to get my aboves and belows mixed up here. Higher chance of below average precipitation down here in the Southwest. But you can tell that the jet is pretty active. I mean, this is a 50% chance of precipitation being above normal, and that can be rain, that can be snow, something in between. So that's the latest outlook. Now let's we'll continue to kind of progress this the way we've been doing it. Let's speak on the latest European model. Is it showing any storms to latch onto? Anything that we can say, hey, there's going to be a storm in this time frame. We just got to figure out the details. Well, let's start this off Sunday morning, February the 2nd. Okay, time frames are up here if I forget to mention them. We get this in motion. Here's a clipper that'll ride through the Great Lakes area. You can see the snow. This will move into the northeast right at the end of this weekend, Sunday night. And then here comes a pretty strong storm system flying over the Rockies. Not much for the central and southern Rockies because the jet is kind of cruising across this region right here. So this will bring heavy snow to the higher elevations and even kind of the medium elevations, if you will, like not so high up. I would say the snow levels will be pretty low in this. I don't know if Seattle's going to get a major snowstorm out of this, but I could see as cold air kind of makes its way in, if Seattle, those lower elevated regions, Medford, Eugene, is going to get any kind of winter weather, I could see it happening in this pattern coming up. But you can see this band of snow breaking out across the Dakotas. That looks kind of like it gets somewhat kind of sheared out, if you will. But you can tell in the southern sections of the country is pretty quiet. There's not a whole lot going on. There's a ridge dominating the pattern, but eventually you could get some moist air that gets pulled north out the Gulf. And we start to get into Wednesday morning. And I would say that this is the first time frame to really watch out for. Of course, you're going to continue to have a feed of moisture into the western U.S. Higher elevation snow, lower elevation rain, and even the lower elevations can get winter weather from this because of all the cold air in place. But as far as the central and eastern U.S., I would say the middle portion of next week is the next time frame to watch. You got a big influx of moisture coming up. How deep would the moisture be? You got a low developing off the Rockies, and here it comes ejecting across the country. Who knows? This might bring some severe weather south of this low. Not quite sure. Probably going to be lacking true thermodynamics. But Wednesday night into Thursday, you got this system cutting across. Hey, this might bring some nasty freezing rain for you folks up here in the Great Lakes region and those, I would say, higher elevations of the interior Mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. But this looks like it cuts, which means that you're eventually, even if you start out as winter weather for these areas, you're going to go to rain. I mean, in early February. Pretty wild. And then this moves on. Do we get a kind of intrusion of cold air behind this? We continue to have energy shooting across the Rockies. This energy will always, I would say for the most part, make its way into the central portion of the country eventually. But you continue to move forward, and we're starting to get into closer to that no man's land, right? Day 7, day 10, not a very reliable time frame. And once again, we have kind of this overrunning setup sort of occurring over areas of the Midwest, the Ohio Valley into the Northeast next weekend, like the 7th, 8th, 9th. Is that going to happen? Not quite sure. I do think the pattern gets more wintry once we get closer to this time frame. Like this wants to bring a winter storm into the Northeast. You see all this snow, and then the cold air begins to drop ever so slightly further south. Here comes another system. The jet begins to sag further south. So, excuse me, hiccups a little bit. We got snow breaking out a little bit further south, so this is down to the plains. A little bit of snow trying to break out in the higher elevations of North Carolina, Virginia, and then all of a sudden, and this is pretty far out, guys, past 10 days, all of a sudden you get a winter weather event breaking out across Virginia, the favored cold air damming regions. Remember, that's cold air getting trapped east of the Appalachian Mountains, and then this kind of rides up, becomes a significant winter storm. And remember, this is getting close to hour 300, so this is getting into like past the February 10th time frame, but it does show what would seem like a more active wintry pattern. And I do think this time frame will favor maybe a shot of cold air even into the eastern U.S. It's just how long does it last? And even once you get past this time frame, it wants to show a little bit of snow as far south as South Carolina at hour 300. So it's pretty far out. But there's been a lot of energy with some cold air flying around this time period, I will say. And then, wants to drop some snow across North Carolina. Not a forecast, getting closer to like Valentine's Day. And then, not a whole lot happens after that. It looks like a trough drops out west, which is what a lot of models are showing. Now, the latest GFS, it's not very excited about any winter weather outside the areas that's been seeing it. But it will show you what it's showing. And this is getting into Monday morning. We got this clipper that flies through the northeast, and some light to moderate snow breaks out across the higher terrain of the plains. The higher latitudes of the plains. And then we get into that next time frame I'm watching as far as overrunning. So it's getting in Wednesday, February the 5th. There is a little bit of winter weather breaking out across areas of the mid-Atlantic, some snow up here to the north. We'll have to see what this system does. What I'll say is I do think there's going to be a system Wednesday, Thursday, maybe Friday-ish of next week, especially maybe Wednesday into Thursday. I think it's going to be a whole lot of rain for a lot of people. But we're going to get a winter weather side of this. But is this winter weather side going to even be in the U.S. or is it going to be up here in eastern Canada? So that's telling you how much these low pressures are cutting. But it just wants to show a big rainy kind of wintry mix. If anything, might start off as a nasty icy mix and then switch to rain. But we'll figure out the details of that. I think that could be a pretty strong storm system. I just don't know if it's going to be a very wintry storm system. So we start to get into Thursday, we get into Friday, a little bit of a calm period based off the GFS, and this is when we get into no man's land. We don't know what's going to happen, but the GFS does kind of show what the Euro shows, and kind of a similar storm system is the one that will likely happen this week. Another one comes late next weekend. A lot of rain for kind of the same areas, and most of the winter weather is kind of pushed off to the north. Southern Ontario, Quebec, and then we kind of get this push of cold air, but it's very fleeting. And the ridge builds right back in place, and we kind of start to recycle the same pattern once again, and we'll just try to go finish the run here. And then at the very end of the run, it shows a huge winter storm across these areas. But listen, that's 336 hours out, so very hard to take that serious, right? So yeah, so what do you take from the operational runs at least? Well, you would say, hey, there's going to be a storm system probably next week across, let's back it up. It's going to be a storm system next week across these areas right here. You might as well say the entire eastern U.S., but as far as where your most precipitation is going to be, I would probably draw a circle like right here into this region. And the winter weather side to this is going to be, I don't know if it's going to be any bigger than the rainy side of this. And then if you ask me, hey, when is the next time frame to watch as far as a storm system? I would say that we don't know because a model guidance is flying everywhere. But if you look at kind of the footprint of snow off the Euro ensemble, remember this makes up 51 members, creates a mean or average. And this is in 3-day periods, so 72-hour periods. And we start this off later this weekend. You can tell the footprint of snow is mainly up to the north and to the northern Rockies and the Cascades and even the Sierra Nevada. There's not any kind of footprint of snow to the south. We start to get later into next week. Still, footprint of snow is further to the north. Now, there is probably some ice kind of right into this region. I'll show you that here in a second. But, we start to get between day 7 and day 10. We get into next weekend. You can see you start to get a little bit of a signal that creeps a little bit further south. And then the signal starts to get louder in the northeast. And I think it's trying to tell us that I think if I had to give my own take, I like to show you what the models are showing and give you my own take. I think we need to watch out for a stronger winter storm in the northeast. I think probably around between the 8th and the 12th of February. I think we might get a more widespread winter storm. We'll see what happens there. And the ensembles support this. But you notice this little area right down here. I'm going to draw a line or circle or whatever right in here. To me, that tells me that looks like cold air damming. Okay, so you see that little footprint, kind of notch of snow right there. You know, some models are picking up on a winter storm down to North Carolina, and it actually gets even louder further southwest as you progress this forward. And, you know, the signal begins to rise once again across the plains. And so, in general, it does look like as you get deeper into this ensemble run, getting all the way almost to mid-February, the snow mean, the snow average does slightly tick further south. Now, I do think there's I think we're gonna get an icy storm somewhere along the line. And if you look at the latest ensemble run from the Euro, as far as ice, like the ice mean, ice average, this isn't a forecast, but it does like the idea. I'm gonna just go all the way through. I'm just gonna go all the way through day 10. It likes the idea of a lot of ice being possible in the Northeast, the Great Lakes region, the southern sections of Ontario. Now, I think this is being overdone. I know it is for a lot of areas, but I think you should just look at this and say, hey, you know, we're probably going to have to deal with some ice for someone. So, as far as the pattern, we've spoken on this many times. Remember, the warmer colors, the orange, the red you see on your screen, it's a ridge of high pressure. Typically, you get warmer than average temperatures. And then the blues and like this greenish color, that's a lower pressure, a trough of low pressure. It's going to bring cold air. It's going to bring a storm system with it, maybe multiple storm systems. It's basically where you can kind of gauge the track of the jet. So if we start this off, and this is once again the Euro ensemble, if we start this off around Monday evening, this is where the main storm track is cruising. Let's get this up. Just like this. Okay. Low pressure, whether it's like right here. This is where it's all going. All our little pieces of energy, short waves, low pressures, that's the main avenue. Now, it doesn't mean you're not going to get energy that kind of undercuts the ridge and comes up through here. I mean, that's absolutely possible. Happens all the time. But the flow is going just like this. And if you think about it, if you watch this entire video from the beginning to right now, it makes sense. You're getting a lot of energy moving into the Rockies, and this is why. Because that jet is sitting right there. You got a lot of energy that's bringing snow up into Canada and kind of the U.S.-Canadian border, and we got clippers flying into the Northeast. So it makes sense, if you look at the footprint of snow and you match it up with this, why it's happening. At the same time, you got this ridge bubbling up and pretty much torching. You might as well use that word. We use it a lot in the weather world as far as when you have temperatures in the winter that are well above average. And heck, it's almost going to get up to 80 degrees here in my house, even today in Columbia. But we're going to get a lot of 70s, maybe even some low 80s in certain areas in the south next week. But we keep this going. Is anything going to change with this pattern? You look at the blues, you look at the shiftings of the red and the orange. You can see that orange begins to shift into the eastern U.S., which makes sense. If you kind of go back and you look at, let's look at this. This is the 6 to 10 day period. So when is this going to take us? It takes us to the 5th through the 9th. Now you go back and look at this, and I just want you guys to kind of understand what you're looking at, how it matches up with what the experts are saying. So you kind of envision that in your head. Then you go back to this, and you say, okay, well that makes sense. The axis of the warmer temperatures and the colder temperatures, you see that? You see how it's kind of going just like that? And then you look at that, it makes sense, right? Ridge, kind of over areas of the south, the eastern U.S. So what does that mean? Well, it means the storm track is probably going like this. And then everybody in this region right here is probably above average temperature-wise. As far as how above average, it just depends. But this is where your cold air is dumping down into here, and then this boundary, moisture kind of trying to build up into this region. You're probably going to have an opportunity for some winter weather. And then just rain for the south. Now you progress this even further. We get into late next week. We're about a week from today right here. This little nudge right here is interesting to me. So we kind of got like this, and then it kind of nudges like that. So that's something to watch. Are we going to trend that further south? But in general, still got the ridge down here. Still got a lot of cold air in the main storm track going just like that. Okay, the pattern is still trying to get figured out by the models. Models are still trying to figure it out. But you keep going here, and there's another nudge I'm watching. and this is past 10 days, we still can have this continuous feed of cold air. That's the thing. You can say we're lacking cold air, and we are, but we continue to have a source of cold air from the northern latitudes. I mean, you have this consistent negative EPO, this blocking mechanism, and this is funneling in cold air. It's just stopping kind of in this area. It's hanging out over the northern latitudes, and the southern sections, and even the southeast, and even areas in the mid-Atlantic are still just getting warmer temperatures. So we're going to have an intrusion of this trough. And you continue to go forward here all the way 300 hours out, and most model guys continues to like the idea of just to drop this trough way down to the western U.S. So what would that mean? That would mean most of our systems would kind of dive down into here, okay, and then kind of down into here, and then shoot across this way. Now that they could go like this, could go like that. I think that we're going to, my take is I think we're going to trend this trough a little bit further east in time. But the Euro ensemble continues to like to dump this trough out west, and this would just bring a lot of cold air into this region right into here. Okay, with that storm track the way I just showed it. And you continue to go forward here, and the thing is you ask where's the cold air. I mean, it's there, it's just out west. And at the very end of the run, the ridge is back. Now, could this shift? Absolutely. And I expect some pretty big shifts. It looked like we were shifting yesterday, and then overnight we kind of just went back in the other direction. Now, if you look at the Euro, let's look at the GFS ensemble. Does it show anything different? Well, it only goes out, so it's only going out about a week, so it doesn't go out far enough. If we look at the OOZ, what does it show? We get the 10 days out, not a whole lot different. And yeah, I mean, it drops the trough out west with a huge spiking ridge across the eastern U.S. So, a lot of people are talking about different things, and a big thing out there right now is the models are struggling to try to figure out, and we have like a tipping mechanism that can throw the entire country in the freezer or torch the entire country. But right now, I mean, to me, the pattern really favors cold mainly in the western U.S. But as far as above average temperatures, which show up in like the reds you see on your screen, and the oranges, and this kind of weird color right here, that's well above average temperatures. But you see the cold air tries to ooze into the northern terrain. I think Montana is just going to be very cold for an extended period of time. But you can see the Pacific Northwest starting to get below average, but the entire southern tier of the country begins to torch. We get into late next week. I mean, look at those well above average temperatures into the eastern U.S. and look, the western U.S. starts to get very cold, and some of this cold air could sneak into the central U.S., back into the Great Lakes region, the northeast. But it looks like it tries to start to get back down to the southeast, but we'll see what happens. If you stop it here, this is the evening of the 11th of February. It looks like a good chunk of the country is below average as far as temperatures. But it does look like at the very end of the run, the above average temperatures begin to flex again. So a lot of people are talking about this, the polar vortex, and how it's going to get stretched, dislodged. Well, not dislodged, but it's going to get stretched, which is going to dislodge cold air. So, to try to explain this the easiest way possible, when you have a lot of cold air bottled up, these lower heights, lower pressure bottled up in the higher latitudes like this, where, I mean, we basically have just a ton of cold air. Basically, the polar vortex is strong off this look. Then you're typically not going to have a lot of cold air down into the lower latitudes. So if you continue to watch this is most of the cold air is kind of bottled up to the north, which is why Canada's been so cold lately. Let's switch it to this. And if we look at the Euro and what kind of happens here, the Euro, as we go through in time, we're going to have to speed this up. It begins to kind of detach a lobe of the polar vortex south. And it takes some time, but eventually it stretches it out, and then it drops into North America. Now, it wants to sort of drop this maybe over areas of eastern Canada first, but doesn't really get all the way down far enough south. But eventually it does stretch and begins to really stretch over areas of just the entire lower 48, but especially the central and the western U.S. But you can tell that the polar vortex is weakened at this point because you have the higher heights. You have basically what looks like a ridging over the North Pole. This dislodges cold air one way or the other. So a lot of people are talking about the polar vortex being split. Happens sometimes it fully splits, sometimes it throws the entire thing at us, etc. So, I don't pretend to be an expert in this. I just kind of leave it with the main information, which is, hey, strengthened polar vortex is going to keep all the cold air bottled up to the north. Weakened means cold air is getting dislodged on maybe multiple sides of the globe, maybe one. So the MJO, and a lot of people are talking about this too, I think we're just going to struggle to get cold back fully for the eastern U.S. and the southern tier of the country until the MJO works in our favor. And right now, the MJO is progressing at a pretty decent clip. We're the 31st, so we're around phase 5 right now, which is a warm phase. Phase 4, phase 6, and even phase 7 are warm phases for the eastern U.S. Now, once you get into phase 7, that's getting back into a cold phase for like the central and western U.S. And these can be better phases for the western U.S. too. The phases are different depending on what part of the U.S. you live in. But it says it progresses. I mean, heck, by the time we're into this weekend, we get into phase 6, and then it has it kind of getting just bending and hooking right into this region. It shows it right here too. It really slows down, hangs out in phase 5, phase 6. But if you look at the very end here, that looks like February 13th right there. It is trying to make its way to the golden phase if you want, cold and wintry conditions in winter. Phase 8 and phase 1. Phase 2 is great too. As we get to the middle portion of the month. And I really think that we're going to get to phase 8. It's just, when are we going to do it? I think we're going to do it probably later in the month. But I would say that there's a lot of disagreement here. There's a lot of the squiggly lines. Oh, that's not good. A lot of the squiggly lines are trying to stall this out somewhat in phase 6 and phase 7. So I know this is pretty hard for you guys in the audience to probably understand. And what you need to know is, if you live in the east, the southern tier of the country, especially further east, phase 4, phase 5, phase 6, phase 7 is pretty much warmer phases. You got to get it back working in phase 8, 1, and 2, like we just came out of, that brought all the winter weather across, the historic winter storm and stuff like that across the south. But as far as today's weather, there's a lot going on. I mean, we got this upper low spinning around here across the Midwest. We got this area of rain and even storms moving across the south, big chunk of rain across the mid-Atlantic, and we got some wintry precipitation in the form of a little bit of freezing rain moving across the interior New England northeast area, and we're going to get some wet snowfall in the northern fringe of this system over the next 24 hours. And we got bigger rounds of precipitation moving into the west. It's been pretty quiet out here, but this is a warmer setup as of now, but cold air is going to come in, and it's going to drop the snow levels for a lot of areas out west, but this is a lot of precipitation moving in. As far as watches, warnings, and advisories, you do have those winter weather advisories for this system moving in. And this is mainly driven off the freezing rain element to it. Not going to get a ton of snow out of any of these areas right in here. But moving out west, a lot going on. We got winter storm warnings in the pink. We got winter weather advisories in the purple. And in this kind of teal color, winter storm watches. Now, what's interesting to me is, you even have winter storm warnings in like the coastal range, winter storm watches, and certainly probably going to get a lot of winter weather in the Olympic Mountains. And if you zoom into Seattle, even the higher hills around Seattle, it's starting to get close. No winter storm watches in Seattle. If you go down the valley, Portland, nothing. Eugene, nothing. And Medford, nothing. But it'll be interesting to kind of watch what happens and if the snow levels can get low enough to bring snow to those valley towns and cities. So, but we zoom back out here. We look at everything, and let's look at the risk of severe weather. There is a marginal risk of severe weather along the panhandle of Florida, southeast Alabama, southwest Georgia. So we will watch out for a little bit of severe weather down here, but I wouldn't be too worried about this. I don't think this is going to be a big deal at all. Yesterday we had a slight risk, and it didn't really end up doing a whole lot from what I've heard. But we do have a slight risk of excessive rainfall from Chicago through northern Illinois. And then we have it here for West Virginia. Could get a little bit of flooding. This means there's a 15% chance of flash flood guidance being exceeded within 25 miles in a given location. And then the southeast today, some storms will make their way through. You got that marginal risk, so just be careful for some severe weather. You got this thin line of storms making its way through Georgia, rain across eastern Tennessee, western North Carolina, western South Carolina. And we're probably going to get some thunderstorms through Georgia, the panhandle of Florida, maybe all the way up to South Carolina, North Carolina later on this evening. I know me and my wife got a date night, so I might need to bring the umbrella. And then we got this kind of round of heavier rain back behind this first round that develops in the Cumberland Plateau. Maybe some wet snowflakes mixing in here in the higher elevations of North Carolina. And then this heads on out, and we have a better day for tomorrow. A little bit cooler, but a better day. The northeast, here's our system making its way in. This afternoon, a washout begins to move in. This is mainly rain. Going to have rain falling on top of snow, rain for southern New England. And then some cold air. This moisture moves into some cold air, and we get some wet snow on the northern fringe of this. So central New York, the Berkshires maybe. The Green and White Mountains, maybe some snow. A few inches of wet snow is possible with this. And then this moves on out. Could have some snow flying around in Maine, really the southern and down east areas of Maine. Nova Scotia, prepare for some heavy wet snow for a period, and then we wake up tomorrow morning with some calmer conditions. And snowfall with this between now and the next 48 hours, not expecting much, guys. A couple inches of wet snow, maybe a little bit more. Robin, you might get, who knows, 3 to 4 inches off this. We'll see what happens. And then we do take a look, say, at this area right here. Not much snow in southern New England. And then we'll head on up the road to Maine. Few inches of wet snow, guys. But listen, this isn't going to be a big deal at all for you guys. And just adding on to the winter snow totals that you already got so far this winter. And then ice, I will say, hey, a few 100ths of an inch of ice is possible in this region right here, which is why you have the winter weather advisories. The south central U.S., ain't a whole lot to speak on, guys. Pretty quiet weather. Enjoy your Friday. Ain't got a whole lot for you today. But the north central U.S., we're going to get just some rainy weather from, I would say northern Illinois, up to Chicago. Rain for southern lower Michigan. Could switch to some wet snowflakes at the end. Don't think it's going to add up to much. Might get a burst of snow for Cleveland, even Detroit to later on this evening. And then this heads on out, and then we'll have to watch our next clipper. Not a very active day for most, but the further south you get, the more moisture you run into. And then out west, here comes our big system moving in. It's going to cross the Rockies. A lot of snow flying around the northern Rockies. And then after that, we get that more convective element to it. More cold air kind of gets introduced. More rain starts to move. Moisture moves into Northern California tomorrow morning. And then we just get this rounds of snow, bursts of snow that kind of moves into the Pacific Northwest. And as you can tell, you're seeing more blue on your map up here. So snow levels begin to drop. Maybe this is your opportunity to get some snow in those lower elevations. I'm not sure what the local National Weather Service is calling. This is the National Weather Service forecast, but this is between now and the next 48 hours. A lot of snow is going to add up in the Olympic Mountains and a few to several inches even in the coastal range. But Seattle, right now they're not going for anything. But just pretty much in all directions from you, you're going to get heavy snow. And you're going to get feet of snow up here in the Cascades. Portland, not really going for anything. So, could this change? It could, but Salem, Portland, Eugene, down to Medford, it's looking like this is going to be too warm for you guys. We'll see if that changes as we get in early next week, though. And then we look at Montana and the Northern Rockies, and this is how much you're expecting. Not even expecting that much of a colder element to this, even in Montana. But as some cold air works in early next week, maybe your opportunity shows up. But temperatures today, it'll be very warm across the south. It's going to get well into the 80s in my neck of the woods, widespread 80s in Florida. And you can tell all the cold air is bottled up to the north. I mean, even warming on up for the Midwest, the Ohio Valley, and then out west. Like I said, it's a warm system at first. Cold air will move in more so tomorrow into Sunday. You can see there's a really cold boundary up here in the Dakotas and Minnesota, separating bitterly cold air with well above average air. So that's all I got. Thank y'all for tuning in. God bless all y'all and have a great start to your weekend.